And welcome to The Bottom Line, where we do precisely that. We take the opportunity to get to the bottom of some of the main economic and business stories of the day. Today's announcement of the National Bank of Hungary that interest rates are now cut yet again by 25 basis points to 6.5% gives us the chance to look into Hungary's current economic situation and its plans for 2025. I am joined now by Janos Nagy, macroeconomic analyst of Hungary's Erste Bank, to tell us about today's decision and more. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good afternoon.
So I'd like to begin with the financial and economic impact of the recent days of flooding in Hungary. Was Hungary ready for this? And more importantly, would it be ready if the situation was actually more acute?
Yeah, I think Hungary was quite well set for this this flood. So I wouldn't expect any severe economic impact because of that.
And earlier today, we obviously heard the announcement of the National Bank of Hungary lowering the key interest rate by a quarter point to 6.5%. We know that the bank has been taking down the interest rate steadily since October 2023. Can you tell us how the Hungarian economy has been benefiting and responding from these decisions over these consecutive months?
Yes, the situation is actually the conjuncture in Hungary is quite weak at the moment, we could say, and there are several factors behind that. External situation is also a crucial factor in that. However, the domestic situation, the domestic demand is also need a boost in many ways. Investments were the most prominent negative contributor in the second quarter's economic growth. So that should really need a boost, and these kinds of steps from the central bank could also support this phenomenon.
But judging by what we've seen so far, how long and how low do you think the central bank will bring down the rates in, let's say, a year or so? What can we expect to see?
Yeah, actually, it's a quite hard question. I think it will really depends on the major central banks' path, in which we could see a quite dovish pivot recently, and Hungary should also observe the regional peers, for example, Poland and Czech Republic and Romania. I think for the short term, the Polish interest could be a bottom line for the Hungary's rate cuts in the upcoming months.
I wanted to ask you if you could give us a little bit of insight, especially from your perspective. We saw that the forecast for the second half of 2024 is expected to be a bit worse than that of the first half. We've seen inflation going down a bit. What do you see now? What are your observations, and what do you actually expect to see by the end of this year?
Actually, the central bank's growth figures are quite similar than ours at Erste Bank. So it's I think we have a similar view in that sense in many ways. The third quarter also started quite weak. We also observed it via the high frequency data which we observed. So that's a common sense in that. On the other side, inflation outlook was really optimistic from the central bank's point of view. So they expect to return the repricing patterns of the pre-pandemic period. So 2016, from 2016 until 2019, which is, I think, really quite on the optimistic side. Besides many factors, the fundamentals are quite different in many ways, and that's I think it brings in a controversy in that whole forecasting setup.
And now I wanted to discuss Hungary's position and looking outward and perhaps speaking a little bit about controversies. Hungary is strengthening and developing its economic ties with Russia. Generally speaking, there is that opinion that Hungary is taking on more of an eastbound approach, which is noticeable in many partnerships. And the last one is actually this announcement this week on green finance, Hungary's economic ties with China. And I was just wondering whether you could tell us a little bit more about this green finance relationship that has been going on with China for almost actually a decade. And Hungary actually boasts of a very strong relationship that is actually at an all-time high with China. Can you tell us a little bit more about these partnerships and generally speaking about Hungary's relationship with China?
Yes, actually, Hungary tried to be a bridge, I would say, between East and West in many ways. I wouldn't like to comment so much on it, whether is it a good way to prosper or not, but actually it's kind of a fact. On the energy sources side, it's really the independence the dependence, sorry, from Russia is still really strong. However, the economic outlook is more, I think it's more like influenced by the connections and the really strong German partnerships, companies. The largest trading partner is Germany. So I would say the conjuncture is more like depends on the German outlook and how the German economy could evolve in the next years than how these Eastern relations stands.
Well, maybe we could take it from a more domestic perspective. Hungary has been the beneficiary of approximately 16 billion euro of Chinese FDI, EV, the BYD factory, and also the Belt and Road Initiative, which is obviously highly discussed here in Europe. Can you tell us about perhaps how that is perceived, perhaps domestically, on that economic front?
Actually, this battery production, EV production is the main focus of these investments and projects. So that could be a field when, if it's really get a boost from the European policymakers, then I would say that in Hungary could became in a really strong position in that due to that. And actually, it's the source of these funds. The aim, the target market is the European market. So all these, the success of all these investments and projects will highly depend on how the European economy evolve in the upcoming years.
And tell us about Hungary's government budget outlook in light of the current fiscal landscape and perhaps a more optimistic GDP growth outlook for 2025.
Yes, actually, it's a hazy outlook, I would say, for the Hungary's budget. This year's 4.5% deficit target is, I think, it's achievable. But we expect at Erste Bank a slightly higher figure for this deficit, and the next target is also could start with 4. So we would see a slight decrease in these figures in the upcoming years.
And obviously, Hungarian economic growth and overall recovery is contingent on consumer confidence, which Hungary hasn't really benefited from as of yet, despite the wage growth and the interest rate cuts this year. Why has that been the case?
Yes, actually, Hungary experienced in 22-23 a quite strange and unique inflation crisis, which almost turned into an exchange rate crisis. So that whole process, whole negative process, ended up in a precautiousness of the households, and this motive is still really strong. And actually, they try to find another ways to spend, for example, mainly abroad, which also hold back the Hungarian retail figures, for example. So I think the upcoming months should be about to bring back the Hungarian consumers to the domestic markets.
And just very briefly, as we wrap up our conversation, what is the impact of these lowered interest rates over the recent months on the forint, especially in the context of exports for Hungary?
Yes, to be honest, in short term, I could not say so much argument for the forint, to be honest. So we expect a slight weakening. The exports have quite a bad performance in recent months, as we saw the German outlook and the automotive industry's outlook. It's still not getting into shape. So from that side, it could be a really strong burden. On the other hand, an awakening domestic demand is foreseeable. So that could not support the exchange rate. What we can really rely on is the rate difference, which the central bank will maintain compared to the major central banks and maybe the regional peers.
Okay, Janos Nagy, thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Janos Nagy of the Hungarian Erste Bank was our guest today. Thanks so much for joining us on The Bottom Line on Business Arena. I was your host, Marie Caso. Join us back again tomorrow at 5 p.m. CET on TVP World. For more business stories, check us out on X and on tvpworld.com. Coming up next, World Talks. Goodbye.